Drums, Girls, and Dangerous Pie. Chapter 7. Take Me. Once I was forced to believe that Jeffrey really had cancer, my mind played another big trick on me. I started to think that if I just made the right promises to God, he would magically make Jeffrey all better again. And the promises just popped into my head, right and left, day and night. This made for a tough couple of weeks. I'd be in the lunch line at school and a pack of ring-dings would catch my eye. I'd say to myself, okay, if I don't eat those, Jeffrey will get better. Or I'd promise things like, if I never hit Jeffrey again, he'll get better. About 20 times a day, too, I'd swear that I'd never think impure thoughts about Renee. If Jeffrey would be all right. But let's face it, I'm a 13-year-old American male. I have no willpower. So every night I'd go to bed totally convinced that I was going to gain 20 pounds and be a fat, violent pervert forever, and that my little brother was doomed. Then in the morning I'd start all over. Like, I'll floss every single day, even between the molars if... Of course, there were times when I wasn't bargaining, but those were generally just times when I was busy breaking the promises. It was like the exact opposite of Lent. I would swear to give things up and then immediately do them. I was a mess. When I realized how bad I was at giving things up, I tried to find other deals I could make with God. One day in gym, we were hitting softballs with this pitching machine that the baseball team uses for training, which we almost never get to use. But it was a really nice day, and the teachers must have been desperate to get outside one last time before winter started. So I was telling myself, alrighty, if I hit this next pitch, Jeffrey is okay. Then I'd miss because with my thick glasses, I basically have no depth perception at all. So immediately I'd be at it again. Okay, how about 2 out of 3? Strike 2. 4 for 6? Whiff. 7 out of 10? Naturally, I know what a spasmo I am at sports. Yeah, I know drummers are supposed to be coordinated, but it doesn't matter how coordinated you are if you're as blind as a bat. So I know I should have found some smarter bets to make. And I did. By the end of the first week, I was scrounging at the bottom of the barrel for deals to make. Here's a pathetic one. Here goes a good offer, Lord. If that bird on that tree over there flies away within 10 seconds, Jeffrey is cured. That was in the middle of math class, while I was staring out the window as the class checked the homework I hadn't done. Unfortunately, I got distracted by the teacher's despairing cry, Alper, any chance you can answer number 37? When I looked back out there, the bird was long gone, probably scared off by the outburst of yelling that was going on in my classroom. I was fairly certain it had been longer than 10 seconds between when I first looked away and the moment when the teacher's attempt to engage me devolved into top-volume random threats to my safety. But we'll never know for sure. As usual, drumming was my big escape from all this reality stuff. Rehearsals and practice times by myself were like these little islands of okay in a vast sea of holy crap. So I hopped from little musical island to little musical island. One day, a weird thing happened to me. I left math class to go to the bathroom, and on my way back, I heard this beautiful piano playing coming from the band room. Now, of course, I knew it had to be Annette. She was the only unbelievable keyboard prodigy in the building. And I knew that she had this independent study piano period. But when I walked over and stuck my head in the band room door, I couldn't really process what I was seeing. There was this truly pretty girl sitting at the piano, with this amazing posture and her hair falling long around her face in a quite non-Annette-ish way, and a serene look I had never noticed on her face before. She finished the piece and looked up after a long, long time. I would be toasted like a barbecue wiener when I got back to math, and blushed. She actually blushed. It was like as soon as the music disappeared, so did smooth Annette. Then she mumbled, Chopin. What? That piece, it's Chopin. I'm getting ready for an audition at Juilliard next month, but I'm not nearly ready yet. You're kidding, right? That was the best thing I've ever seen, ever. Ever. What's at Juilliard? It's a famous music school in Manhattan. They have an intensive program for high school students every Saturday from 8 to 1. So you'd have to get up around 6 to get there? I'd have to get up around 4:30 to get there, but my parents are willing to drive me, and don't you want to have some free time on Saturdays? Stephen, this is... Oh, forget it. Want to try something? Suddenly, another new Annette had sprung up. She had kind of a mischievous, flirty grin on her face. Sure. Sit down at the drum set. Go ahead. Now get ready to play what you hear, okay? All right. And she burst into this fantastic, complicated jazz thing. So I tried to play along with the ding, ding, a ding, ride cymbal thing that always works for jazz, and immediately got the beat all turned around and messed up. Annette stopped playing and laughed. She looked at me and jumped in again. Again, I got ruined in seconds. So she jumped in for another go-round, and another, and another. Finally, I had to ask, what is this? Oh, it's just a little something I picked up off a CD this week. It's called Take 5. It's by this piano player named Dave Brubeck from like 1963. Why can't I play it? Well, the beat is in 5/4 instead of 4/4. Huh? You have to count 5 beats in every measure instead of 4. That's why it's called Take 5. Want to take another shot? Just then the bell rang, and I realized I had now officially skipped out of my first class ever. Annette just smiled that new smile again and flipped me a CDR disc. Here it is, learn it. Then she bopped off down the hall with this old bunny on puppet strings walk I was used to, leaving me to wonder what had just happened. I was fairly sure that something had. Things were happening at home, too. Around the second week of Jeffrey's treatment, I guess word got out among my parents' friends that it was time to acknowledge Jeffrey's illness. All of a sudden, as if somebody had thrown a switch, phone calls started pouring in. Cards jammed up our mailbox. A flood of concerned grown-ups started pulling up to our house with baskets and bags of food, flowers, balloons, toys. I admit that the edible stuff gave me a nice break from being the microwave Hot Pockets poster child, but the whole scene was kind of bizarre. You can picture it. The well-wisher comes in. We all thank him, or more often her, as the Tupperware is handed over. Then everybody stands around awkwardly while the visitor tries to find appropriate things to say to my parents. If I'm around, it's weird. They ask me how I am, but I can't actually tell them about anything that's going on in 90% of my life. They really mean, how are you? Specifically with regard to your brother's health crisis. And if Jeffrey is there, it's the biggest nightmare of all. Half of them try to be cheery no matter what. So they act all loud and hearty, swinging Jeffrey around and telling corny jokes. Meanwhile, I'm standing there mentally shouting at them, be gentle, you moron, don't bruise him. Please step away from the boy. The other half are solemn no matter what, which is equally horrendous. Because Jeffrey is such a naturally happy kid, he wasn't generally downhearted in those early days despite the illness. Sometimes he had really bad aches, especially in his legs, and he was tired a lot of the time. And the chemotherapy drugs were making him feel pretty rotten physically. But mentally, he was Jeffrey. The kid wanted to laugh and play and maybe watch Nickelodeon when things got too exhausting. And when the frowny people came, they almost wanted to see Jeff be a sad, sick boy, to earn the pot roast they were carrying or whatever. And those visits dampened his spirits for a while at least. After a week or so, though, Jeffrey and I made a game of it. As somebody started up our front walk, carrying the obligatory gigantic shopping bag, I would say, "Okay, Jeff, what do you think? Frowny or cheery?" "Definitely cheery, I think. We've had 3 frownies in a row." "You may be right, little man. We are due for a cheery right about now, but she's looking a bit nervous. I'll bet you $1 she's going to be a frowner." Then we'd open the door, smirk at each other throughout the visit, and finally assign the visitor a score after she left. No matter how horrendous the experience had been, I could usually get Jeffrey to laugh by acting like a sports commentator. "A tremendous effort by kind old Mrs. Jacobs from the accounts payable department. She brings an apple pie, but wait a minute, it's store-bought. That's a mandatory deduction, Jeff. We'll have to give her about 5 out of 10 for baked goods. In the behavior category, she's definitely cheery, Jeff. I owe you $1. You gambling shark." But she clears her throat repeatedly, a clear sign of discomfort. On the other hand, she did pat your head pretty vigorously. I'm going to have to call that a 7. "But she smelled kind of funny, Stephen. Is that points off?" "Ooh, it is. Another mandatory deduction. Was it a dirt smell or an oldness smell?" "Oldness." "Okay, that's another mandatory deduction. Why don't we call this a 6 overall?" Meanwhile, my parents would tell us to be nice if they saw all this. But I got the feeling it amused my dad as much as anything else had since Jeffrey's nosebleed. Near the end of Jeffrey's first month of treatment, there was a big dance at school, the first one of my 8th grade year, which is supposed to be some sort of big deal. You can imagine how much I felt like getting down and partying at that point. But of course, I had to go. It was on a Friday night, one of the nights when Jeffrey was home, and he had been too weak to do anything but watch videos and throw up all day. For about half an hour before dinner, I tried to get him to play checkers, but he finally just wiped the pieces off the board and told me to go away.